So you want to own a toll road, not build one, own one. And I want to start with a single set of numbers because they explain why some of the most conservative money on earth spends its decades chasing this one asset. In 2025, Highway 407 outside Toronto collected $2 billion and 5 million Canadian dollars in revenue. Its total operating expenses for 108 kilometers of highway were $321.6 million. That is an operating margin of 84%. For comparison, a supermarket runs on 1 or 2%. 84 cents of every dollar that road collects survives the cost of running it. There is no inventory, there is no product, nothing you own moves, and the customer has, in most cases, already decided they have no realistic alternative before they ever see the price. In 1999, the province of Ontario leased that highway out for 99 years for $3.1 billion Canadian dollars. In June 2025, one shareholder paid $1.99 billion for a 5% slice of it. Hold that thought because it is the whole story. Over the next 20 minutes, I'm going to show you how a private company comes to own a public road, what the toll actually is, what it costs to run one, why the debt matters more than the traffic, what destroys the people who own these things, and the fact that surprises everyone, that the toll road itself is not really the asset you are buying. Start with how ownership happens, because you are almost never building. The dominant model is a concession or a long-term lease. A government keeps the title and sells you the right to collect every toll on an existing road for decades in exchange for a single enormous check up front. The first American example was the Chicago Skyway in 2005. The concessionaire took on all operating and maintenance cost and got the right to all toll and concession revenue. The second model is that you do build it. Design, build, finance, operate, maintain, all in one contract. The Dulles Greenway in Virginia is the purest case. 14 miles, privately financed, and built between 1993 and 1995 for $350 million, funded with $40 million of equity and $310 million of privately placed debt. State Highway 130 outside Austin, Texas, is the modern version, a 50-year contract signed in 2007, opened in 2012, total project cost $133 billion. And there is a third model, which is the one to watch, because it quietly removes the only real risk in the business. It is called an availability payment. On Interstate 595 in Florida, the State Department of Transportation sets and collects the tolls itself and simply pays the private operator every year for keeping the road open and maintained, reportedly around $64 million a year. The operator's return does not depend on how many cars turn up. Remember that distinction. Traffic risk is the thing that kills owners in this business, and the smartest operators have spent 20 years engineering their way out of holding it. So who actually buys these? Not the private equity villains you are picturing. When the Chicago Skyway was sold in 2016 for $8 billion, the buyers were the Canada Pension Plan, the Ontario Municipal Employees Retirement System, and the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan. Each of them put in roughly $512 million of equity. 3 pension funds bought an American toll bridge on a concession running to the year 204. The Indiana Toll Road is owned today by a fund called IFM Investors, which is itself owned by 30 Australian and American pension funds, including the California State Teachers Retirement System, the New York City Employees Retirement System, and the Illinois State Board of Investment. IFM's own framing is that it bought the road using capital representing about 8.6 million American workers. So when a truck pays a toll in Indiana, some fraction of it lands in a California teacher's pension. That is not a criticism. It is the actual structure of the industry, and it explains its risk appetite. This money wants 99 years of inflation-linked cash, and it will pay enormous multiples for it. Now the deal that started it all, because the numbers are absurd and public. In October 2004, Chicago awarded a 99-year lease of the Skyway, a 7.8-mile elevated road, for $183 billion. The next highest bid was $505 million. The winner paid 2.6 times what the runner-up thought it was worth. Read that again, because in an auction of a known asset with public traffic data, that is not a small disagreement. Somebody understood something the other bidders did not. What they understood was the toll schedule. The car toll on the Skyway was $2 in 2004. The lease permitted $2.50 by 2008, $3 by 2011, $3.50 by 2013, $4 by 2015, $4.50 by 2017, $5 from 2017, and after that annual increases equal to the greater of 2% inflation or the growth in nominal gross domestic product per person. In January 2026, the toll for a two-axle vehicle went to $8.10, $2 to $8.10 in 22 years, 4 times on a road that has not gotten any longer. Chicago, for its part, spent the money the way governments always do. A $500 million long-term reserve, a $375 million medium-term reserve, and $100 million for neighborhood programs drawn over 5 years. Indiana did the same thing on a larger scale. Its $8 billion lease retired $225 million of state debt and funded a road-building program called Major Moves. That is the political engine of this entire industry. A politician gets a decade of visible construction now, and the tolls rise for 75 years after they have left office. Which brings us to the mechanism that makes this asset worth owning, the escalator. Every one of these contracts contains a clause that raises the toll automatically, forever, by at least inflation. The Skyway gets the greater of 2% inflation or nominal growth per person. The Dulles Greenway, between 2013 and 2020, was allowed inflation plus 1% or 2.8%, whichever was higher. Indiana's original lease permitted at least 2% a year. Now watch what that does. In 2025, the Chicago Skyway's traffic actually fell by 0.3%. Fewer cars, and its owners group toll revenue rose 9.4%, driven by inflation-linked toll increases. That is the single most important thing to understand about this business. You are not buying traffic, you are buying a contractual right to raise prices on people who have already organized their lives around your road. A 2% floor compounded over a 99-year term multiplies the toll roughly 7 times over in nominal terms before inflation is even considered. And the operators keep buying more of it. In April 2026, Indiana's toll road operator agreed to pay the state $700 million, $300 million within 30 days, then $200 million a year later, then $200 million more in exchange for the right to raise tolls twice a year by at least 1.5% each time, instead of once a year by 2. It also agreed to spend at least $25 million on capital improvements and to share up to half the revenue above certain thresholds. Think about what that transaction tells you. A sophisticated owner paid $700 million in cash for a change to a compounding clause. So what does it cost to run one? Almost nothing relative to what comes in. Highway 407, 108 kilometers of all-electronic highway, spends $321.6 million Canadian dollars a year, or 16% of its revenue, and it employs about 550 people directly. It runs a fleet of 90 pieces of winter equipment for snow and ice, 24-hour patrols, and free roadside assistance. The Chicago Skyway's entire operating cost in 2025 was about $23 million against $138 million of revenue, 16.8%. There are 2 real operating problems. The first is collection. Once you go cashless, you no longer have a barrier stopping anyone, so you're mailing invoices to license plates. One industry study puts the net cost of all electronic collection around 5% of revenue on a $5 toll and 8% on a $2 toll. The second problem is leakage, the tolls you simply never collect. The Pennsylvania Turnpike has said its leakage runs around 6%, in line with the national average, and in one year nearly 11 million of about 170 million trips generated no revenue at all, roughly $104 million of uncollected tolls. The third cost is the one the contract forces on you, capital. The Indiana Toll Road's current owner rebuilt 73 miles of mainline pavement in one program for about $210 million, then 30 and 45 lane-mile programs for about $70 million each, rebuilt all 8 travel plazas for $75 million, and expects to have invested more than $500 million in upgrades across a decade. The original concessionaire had already been contractually obliged to complete $450 million of mandatory expansion works, and the lease commits roughly $4.4 billion of capital across its full life. You do not get to simply collect. But operating cost is not what runs this business. Debt is. And this is where the industry's real engineering lies. When Sintra and Macquarie bought the Indiana Toll Road in 2006 for $3 $8 billion, they used $374 million of equity each, $748 million together, against $3 billion and $30 million of senior bank debt. 80% of the purchase price was borrowed. The equity was leveraged 4-to-1. The Skyway shows you the same move, faster. It closed in January 2005 with $882 million of combined equity and $948 million of bank loans. 7 months later, it was refinanced into $961 million of capital accretion bonds, $439 million of current interest bonds, and $150 million of subordinated debt, and the equity in the deal was cut to $510 million. Read that carefully. Within a year of buying it, the owners had pulled roughly $372 million of their own money back out and left the road's cash flows carrying $1.5 billion of new debt. And here is the scale of the interest bill that creates. The Chicago Skyway in 2025 carried $157 billion of gross debt at a 5% average cost, about $79 million of annual interest against $115 million of operating profit. Roughly 70% of its earnings before interest goes straight to lenders, against $23 million of actual operating cost. On Highway 407 the same year, interest and other expenses were $472.3 million Canadian dollars against operating expenses of $321.6 million. The lenders cost half again as much as running the road. That is not a distortion. That is the business model. The road is the collateral, and the toll is the coupon. Two other things drive revenue, and neither is the number of cars. The first is trucks on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. Commercial vehicles generated 46.4% of gross toll revenue from 17% of the transactions. On the Indiana Toll Road, driving the full 157 miles costs a passenger car $16.21 and a Class 5 truck $87.49, 5.4 times as much. When you buy a toll road, you are mostly buying a tax on freight, and freight cannot easily choose a different route with a schedule to keep. But the second driver is the free road next door and how bad it is. In 2025, traffic on the Dulles Greenway rose 8.2%, and its owner's explanation was direct: a continued increase in weekday congestion on the competing routes, Route 7 and Route 28. A toll road's revenue is mechanically a function of the misery on the alternative, which raises the obvious question. If your revenue depends on the free road staying bad, what exactly stops the government from fixing it? The answer is a clause, and it is the most revealing artifact in this entire industry. On the SR 91 express lanes in Orange County, California, the original contract prohibited capacity improvements to the adjacent free lanes of the freeway, not discouraged, prohibited. And in January 2003, the Orange County Transportation Authority bought the franchise back for $207.5 million for the specific purpose of killing that clause, because it was blocking about $1.6 billion of planned freeway improvements. The toll lanes themselves had cost roughly $125 million to build. Congress described the general practice in its own research service's words. The private partner insists on a non-compete clause restricting nearby improvements that might reduce toll revenue or requiring compensation. The modern version is subtler and, from the owner's side, better. Instead of forbidding the state from building a competing road, the contract says the state may build whatever it likes and simply has to make the concessionaire whole for the lost revenue, which means the public either keeps the congestion or pays for the cure twice. Now the risk that actually kills owners, and it has been measured. Standard & Poor's compared forecast of actual first-year traffic on 87 toll facilities and 183 non-tolled ones. On the toll roads, actual traffic averaged just 76% of forecast. On the free roads, 96%. That is a systematic 20-point optimism bias attached specifically to the presence of a toll. And it does not wear off. In the same data, the ratio of actual to forecast traffic was 0.77 in year 1, 0.78 in year 2, 0.79 in year 3, 0.80 in year 4, 0.79 in year 5. 5 years in, the forecast is still 20% wrong in the same direction. A later study covering 104 toll roads, bridges and tunnels found projections running 20 to 30% above actual first-year use, with no evidence that forecasting was improving. The man who assembled the largest database of these projects concluded that the forecasts are characterized by large errors and considerable optimism bias, and that financial engineers therefore need to keep the structure flexible and liquid. They did not keep it flexible. On the Dulles Greenway, When the road opened in September 1995, traffic came in below projections and the tolls were cut. Users went up but revenue did not, and the owners began to default in 1996, 1 year in. On State Highway 130 in Texas, a $35 million liquidity facility meant to cover debt service for 5 years was fully drawn in the first few years after toll revenues fell well short of forecasts. It filed for Chapter 11 in March 2016, and in September Sintra handed the road to its creditors. Its lenders were owed more than $1.6 billion, and the equity, about $210 million of it, was gone. And the public was in that deal too. State Highway 130 carried a $430 million federal loan, which Moody's downgraded 5 notches in a single move in 2014. On a comparable Virginia road, the Pocahontas Parkway, the federal government's own agency has published what happened to its money. It sold its interest in a $150 million loan for approximately $60 million. 40 cents on the dollar. On a road where Transurban had already walked away and handed the asset to its senior lenders in 2014. The biggest failure of all was Indiana, and it is the one worth understanding properly, because it looks like a disaster and is not. By 2013, traffic on the Indiana toll road was 10.7% below its 2007 level, according to the bankruptcy filings. The concession filed Chapter 11 in September 2014. The Federal Highway Administration's own postmortem is precise about the cause. Earnings increased every year from 2008 to 2013, but they were lower than projected, forcing the company to devote an ever greater share of operating income to debt service. The significant increase in debt, largely due to the financial structuring used, caused the bankruptcy, not the traffic, the structure. So here is what happened next, and this is the reversal. 6 months after that bankruptcy in 2015, the very same concession, same road, same remaining 66 years, same tolls sold for $725 billion. Nearly $2 billion more than the $3.8 billion it fetched in 2006. The asset had never been worth less. Nearly all of the sale proceeds went to pay the creditors of the company that had just failed, and the new owner then spent the next decade rebuilding the pavement, and in 2026 paid $700 million for a faster escalator. The same pattern shows up where nothing went wrong at all. The 3 pension funds that each put $512 million into the Chicago Skyway in 2016 sold 2/3 of it in 2022 for an equity value of $2 billion and $13 million, roughly $1 billion per third, about double their money in 6 years, before counting the cash the road paid them along the way. In April 2026, the current majority owner formally offered its stake to its co-investor again. The Skyway has now been sold 3 times in 21 years, and each owner has been paid by the next one. Which brings us back to Ontario. In 1999, the province leased Highway 407 for 99 years and received $1 billion Canadian dollars. In June 2025, a 5.06% stake in that road changed hands for $199 billion. Scale that up, and the highway implies a value of roughly $39 billion Canadian dollars, about 13 times what the province sold it for, with 72 years still left to run. In 2025 alone, it collected $2 billion in revenue on 121 million trips, at an average of $16.46 per trip, at an 84% margin. So what is the actual asset? Not the asphalt. The Dulles Greenway answers it definitively. In 2025, that road earned $65.3 million of operating profit and carried $11 billion of debt at 6.1%, roughly $68 million of annual interest. Its interest bill exceeds its entire operating profit. Its debt is 17 times earnings. Its credit rating was cut in April 2025, and its maximum peak toll has been frozen at $5.80 since April 2019. Same country, same asset class, same kind of road. The difference is that in Virginia, a state regulator sets the price, and it is required to allow the owner no more than a reasonable rate of return, and it cannot approve more than 1 year of increases at a time. That is the entire lesson of this business, and it is why the smart money pays 2.6 times the next bid without blinking. Highway 407 is not worth $39 billion because Canadians love driving. It is worth that because a contract signed in 1999 lets its owner raise the price every year for 99 years, and the Dulles Greenway is worth a fraction of its debt because a contract signed in Virginia does not. You are not buying a road, you are buying a clause. The road is just where they keep it.